everyone out there. This is Bsope of NERDgent Care, giving a special solo edition. It's been a little bit. It's been way too long. Wanted to get back out there. Wanted to give a nice segue to our next set of sessions. I couldn't wait to set up a mobile studio to get into it. I'm a little bit nervous for this, a little bit rusty, but just how NERDgent Care was created and just how we're going to get back into this, the only way to go about it is to just start recording, start getting out there. So while we are not a news podcast, it would feel wrong to not at least touch on the current times we're in. And what else could we say that hasn't already been said over and over again? You know, big thank you to the healthcare first responders, essential workers out there. It's definitely unprecedented times, and it'd be remiss to not mention any of this at all. And the reason that's necessary to keep that in mind during this whole pandemic is, yes, being a pop culture podcast, there's going to be plenty of fallout, stuff we can predict, things that are unforeseen. It's going to affect everyone's way of life. And certainly, us fanboys out there, this isn't the most important thing in life. Oh, Batman, the Pattinson Batman got held back a couple months or any of that. There's lives at stake. There's much more at play here. But not being a news pop culture, we can use this time to distract and go over some of the more lighthearted stuff. And we are by no means ignoring any of the bigger aspects at play here. So you can expect normal NERDgent Care to continue. Sessions with me, Bsope, parrot named Mike. Love to keep bringing in Jedi Master Fern. We have to still continue the Star Wars clinic. Who would have known back then when we first started that and we were just looking forward, oh yeah, well, we'll continue this in a week or two. And that was the beginning of March. Look where we are now. Look at what's happening with the world. We have all events, including conventions being canceled, San Diego Comic-Con being the latest. We have movies being delayed and plenty more where that came from. I mean, you can only imagine with the production being held up, just as I'm sure everyone out there is feeling the ripples with their own personal life. The only real winners here are the pets. I have a new rescue puppy, relatively new, and she thinks that someone being home 24/7 and she gets puppy cuddles is just a normal way of life. I mean, I was trying to set up this podcast, a little mobile studio, as I have been sick for about a month. I've been better for a week and was not able to record, was trying to set up, finally had to rescue the equipment, and I'm going to get more into that because that is a little bit of a weird story itself that ties in both the podcast, pop culture, and our current epidemic. And as I created a mobile studio, I'm currently sitting Indian style in bed during this quarantine. And a lot of people are also struggling with setups, work from home and everything. That's definitely impacted the podcast itself. The last 4 nights, it's almost like I'm trying to make an excuse, but the truth was, I get set up, have everything going. My maniac downstairs neighbor decides to start stomping, playing TV loud, hearing the feedback. Oh, can't record. Then the next day, a thunderstorm. Oh, perfect timing. Just last night, the dogs are sleeping, neighbor's quiet. I set up, and I hear my wife in the other room. I hear the HBO start to a show go on, and I can hear it perfectly through the microphone. I'm like, oh my God, I'm having a hard enough time getting back in the swing of things, and all these noises are getting picked up. So I reached out to Parrot. He said, just go with it. Even if it's something we can't edit, at least we'll be getting something out there. We've typically found a home in our mobile studio, and I say that jokingly. One day we'll reveal pictures and everything of it. It's really just a stranger than fiction setup. It's the way it works. It works best for us. But now I just wanted to let you know, as I'm talking about the puppies being, the dogs or pets, any animal being the winners here, I am finally sitting with my 2 tiny dogs in bed. They're under the covers. Shout out to Petco. Thanks for the melatonin CBD dog treats, because they each got one, so I could bring this podcast to you. And the puppy, who thinks life is 24/7, someone's going to be home with them, always ready. She could lay on your lap at all times. So I set myself up in the bedroom to get away from all these various noises, and she jumps up and just lays across the keyboards of the computers I'm working on. So just wanted to pull the curtains back a little bit and show you what I'm working with here. So over the past few weeks, I've obviously been in touch with Parrot on a daily basis, just going through both personal life, future, for NERDgent Care and everything. There were a handful of times that we were going to do some remote podcasts, and we still look forward to that. Some normal, typical sessions. But it did feel very important. It was very important to get this filler out there, so at least there's something, a little bit of an update, a little bit of talking. It's not all going to be talk about coronavirus and everything that's going on, because everywhere you turn, every aspect of social media, every meme, every news story, everything serious or not, it's the times, it's what we're dealing with. I personally have been self-quarantined since early March. Seems like a different life back then. I was planning for a trip down to Miami for a bachelor party about a week or two before it all really hit the fan for New York, and started feeling a little sick. Canceled the trip, well, my part of the trip at least, more so for the sake of spreading any potential virus or whatever I had at the time. Shortly after that, started feeling better, then immediately felt worse. So my wife, she is a healthcare worker. There's a pretty good chance that she was going to come down with this, and we definitely had the symptoms. She ended up testing negative for the virus, but there was no doubt what we had. The symptoms matched. So at first, this was like a gamer's dream, a NERDgent Care dream. And I say that lightly, but understanding that staying home, being able to go on video game, comic book, TV, movie, marathon, binge watching. But the truth is, after the monotony of doing the same thing over and over, when it came time to be a little more productive and get NERDgent Care back on track, these symptoms really took a toll on me. Even now that I'm a little bit healthier, I find myself a little bit more short of breath. And it was almost like the past month that drive was lost. I was talking to Parrot regularly and saying, hey, why don't we do a record? We could do this. We can go over whatever topics. There was plenty of things going on. There's plenty to talk about. He had personal stuff going on as well. But at the end of the day, other than the progress of the video game, it was like life was hit with the pause button. And it kind of put me in a little bit of a funk that was a little hard to break out. So with all that being said, one message I do want to pass out there is, although you're having all this time to spend with your family, loved ones, hopefully stay inside, if at all possible. I know it is in a lot of situations, my wife's included. I'm fortunate that I could log onto a computer from my living room every day for work. My challenge is to stay productive out there, meaning find that creative outlet or something out there, whatever it is that drives you, and keep challenging yourself. This sounds really cliche, but I really mean it. And that is coming from someone whose house currently looks like the Sector 7 slums. But in all seriousness, we're in this together, and how much worse would this be if we didn't have the internet? And we would truly be in this alone. All of the details of what I'm going to say next are true, just to paint a picture of how crazy times are. So about 3 weeks into the quarantine, I haven't left the house. I look like Gollum, straight out of Lord of the Rings. Gollum with a giant ginger beard. A beard like Robin Williams from Jumanji. Right before this quarantine ends, I'm definitely going to take a picture and recreate the "what year is this" meme. So all the following is true. 3 weeks in, I haven't left the quarantine. I needed a couple things, some toilet paper, a couple supplies here or there. Didn't need everything. So I met with someone outside of an abandoned, haunted psych hospital during a pandemic quarantine to pick up toilet paper, baby wipes, a couple of supplies out of the back of a trunk like some kind of quarantine. That's 2020 for you. Now if I filled in the rest of the details, that would take away a little bit of the luster of the story. So the moment I've been waiting for so long, the Final Fantasy VII Remake was finally released, and what a better time. We're all locked inside, nowhere to go. Right now, I have a little bit of a Final Fantasy saga/struggle myself. I'm pretty stressed out about this. So if you've listened to anything NERDgent Care, you would know that I'm the one who just can't help myself. I'll always find a chance to sneak in some kind of a metaphor or anything I can to tie Final Fantasy VII, and it's habitual at this point. It is my favorite piece of media, and I've said this over and over again. TV, books, movies, comic books, games, podcasts, anything I do, anything I listen to, Final Fantasy VII will always be number one in my heart. And we've been waiting for this for a very long time. Keep in mind that the first time we got a glimpse of a potential Final Fantasy VII remake was for the tech demo before the PlayStation 3 came out. And now it's released at the back end of the PlayStation 4 as we're anticipating the release of the PlayStation 5. It's a good amount of time. And with all of this in mind, as a mega fan, and Final Fantasy VII fans, not to say we're bigger fans than any other fans, but there's like a certain, we take so much pride and we have so much love for this franchise that we're just different kind of fans. I've talked to friends from junior high, and I see some people online and their anticipation for this. They go through the same thing I go through. Every couple of years, something would click in my brain, and I would start hearing the soundtrack of Final Fantasy VII. It's like, I got the itch again. I gotta play through it, and thank God for Switch. Now it's easier to do. But as one of the Final Fantasy VII mega fans out there, as this game was getting closer and closer, I was beyond excited for it, but my excitement was slowly turning to a little bit of anxiety. Yeah, I'll use the word anxiety. Anxious for this, not just because I couldn't wait anymore. I had that down. As you get older, you learn to deal with the stuff. I wasn't full-on Cartman waiting for the Wii. Come on. But I was a little bit anxious, thinking, okay, now we know the scope. Before it was released, we knew the scope of the game. Part 1 was going to come out. Part 2 is unreleased. Part 1 is going to cover the Midgar section, which is really 4 hours of the 50 to 60 hour original Final Fantasy VII. So we're going to get a lot more stuff. Is this going to be filler? Is it going to be meaningless quest? Our questions are answered. But at the time, I got a little bit like Parrot Named Mike. I was getting a little bit worried. Had a little bit of pessimistic thoughts in my head. Keep in mind, I don't own a PlayStation 4. So as this was coming up, Saint Parrot, with everything going on in the world, he reminded me that he pre-ordered the game years ago when it was first announced. I said, just pre-order this, don't ask questions, you'll thank me in a year or so, not knowing it was going to be a few years. And as the game was ready to be released, I was kind of shuffling around trying to figure out, all right, do I want to get a refurbished machine? Do I want to get a second-hand one? I need a PlayStation 4. I cannot wait the year or so until this is no longer a PlayStation exclusive, which there still is no announcement on. Saint Parrot steps in and says, and this is before the quarantine went into effect, tells me that, okay, once this comes out, come to my house, pick up the PlayStation 4, pick up the game, the Final Fantasy VII Remake. He's getting it from Amazon, and beat through it, which he understood probably would take me not that much time, and then give it back. And then when Part 2 comes out, I'll have my save file on the cloud and ready to go. So on release day, I drove about 40 minutes each direction to Parrot's house. It was the only human contact I had, and at this time, I had no recording equipment, because when we last recorded a session, I left my laptop, my microphone, not realizing that one day would hit and I wouldn't be able to see the stuff for months at a time. So we had to have a little bit of an undercover pickup at a closed down site, but that's too many details already. The important aspect of this is that Parrot now had my laptop, one of our microphones, all the equipment needed to put out a NERDgent quality podcast. So when I drove to his house to go pick it up, he came outside with 2 cardboard boxes, all freshly Lysoled up, left it at the end of his driveway, ran away so I could walk over and pick it up as his wife and kids waved from the windows. It was a little bit of a surreal moment, but I now upgraded him to Saint Parrot in my book because this was a stand-up move. I mean, I had a Buster Sword cake cutting at my wedding last summer. How am I not going to play this game? So finally, by nighttime of release day, I finally got to play Final Fantasy VII Remake. Probably covered 30 hours of it in the first weekend, maybe a few days into the next week. And oh my God, it's one of those moments. For me, my eyes get watery, not so much during sad or dramatic moments, although I do appreciate them. I have the empathy to appreciate these things. But for me personally, it's just when I'm in the zone, when I'm watching a movie or playing a game, and I'm just feeling it. It's just connecting with me. And it's like a little bit of an embrace of the moment. And playing Final Fantasy VII and just keep in mind the last time you saw these characters on a mainstream Final Fantasy game, they were polygonal figures. It was great for the time, not so much the graphics, but the 3D world that you were playing around in. But even being a kid back then, Cloud's arms didn't make sense. Now you're looking at Cloud Strife and you can see the freckles on his face. You can see the pores on his nose if you look close enough. And this whole time I've been pronouncing Mako Energy wrong. Now that you hear Mako every 2 minutes, I'll talk about Mako Energy and I feel dumb every time they say it. But this game has it. I believe it would be a lot of fun out there for anyone who's not a Final Fantasy fan. But the Final Fantasy mega fans out there, the ones I've talked to, myself included, it's just even knowing where most of the story, the mainstream storyline is going to take you, it makes you well up with emotion. Now keep in mind, this is a remake. It's not a remaster. It's not the original game. It's not a reboot. The Final Fantasy VII Remake, what it is, I can compare it to the expanded universe of the Star Wars universe. Now, we went over this with Jedi Master Fern, but the original Final Fantasy VII is the original trilogy of Star Wars. The little bit of the prequels and some of the sequels, but really what I'm looking at here is the tie-in novels, comics, and TV shows that really fill in the blanks but add so much to the story themselves. For example, without getting into spoilers, there's 3 secondary characters in the original Final Fantasy VII. They make up the rest of their non-playable characters, and they make up the rest of the Avalanche group. And anyone who's played Final Fantasy VII knows their story arc, but it gets so much more fleshed out. And although you care about them in the originals, you care about them so much more in this. And keep in mind, I have not finished this yet, even though the game's been out for a couple of weeks. So my biggest anxieties were alleviated the first 10 hours into this game. As the game was ready to release, I was getting a little bit anxious. With all the time it took to release this game considered, I started getting some negative thoughts. What if this completely overhauls the original, and we've waited this long, and it just misses the mark, just really tugs on the nostalgia strings, really just is an empty experience. But all of those thoughts were completely inaccurate. And everything that I've disliked about the recent Square Enix experience, more so Final Fantasy 15, which I did not dislike, and Kingdom Hearts 3, which me and my wife both strongly disliked. The dialogue, the difficulty levels. Final Fantasy 15 gets a little easy. Our guy gets so overpowered, and it's now you're just hunting monsters that you can easily crush. Kingdom Hearts, the dialogue is disgusting. All of that is non-existent. The dialogue is on point. It's actually very funny. The game has perfectly balanced difficulty so far. I haven't played through all of it, and I'm going to get to why next, because it's tugging on my heartstrings. But you get in some battles. You get in some long battles, and you don't know if you're going to make it out. And when you do make it out, you're happy. But I did have a situation where, and this does tie back to the PlayStation 1 days, where I played the game, I didn't save for a while, I was kind of relying on the autosaves and the checkpoints and everything, which was a grave mistake. So I'm playing through, I lose a surprise battle based on what I have equipped. Oh no. Figure, all right, I'll just go back to the checkpoint before this and reassess my situation. Do that, and it brought me back 2 hours earlier into the game. And I had to replay that. Not so much that this is a good or a bad thing, but it did bring me back because, this is a nostalgia-driven game. It's just how they expand upon the Final Fantasy lore and the amount of heart in this game. It takes the heart from the original and expands on that as well. I could talk about this game all day for a whole podcast, but I can't play it currently. So play this through the weekend, and I go to reattach an HDMI plug into Parrot Named Mike's PlayStation 4, which I roughed the quarantine to go get, and it didn't fit. Well, it turns out the original PlayStation 4 model has a faulty HDMI port that does not last long and succumbs to wear and tear, and that's exactly what happened. So I broke the news to Parrot Named Mike. I frantically looked up for a repair place to overpay to have it fixed. Got one. They kept it for a week, and they said, oh no, our guy who does this, he just came down with coronavirus. He's going to be out for the foreseeable future. We recommend you send this back to Sony to have it repaired. But wait, they're not taking repairs, so it's a couple months before you get it. So reached out to some friends, did some work, picked up the PlayStation 4, overpaid for a HDMI port just so I had one, because Amazon was going to take a little bit, and it's not essential anyway, so that was my little part. I reached out to a few friends and found someone, a friend of mine, Jay, and he has the capabilities to fix it. He just has to get a part from work. So I go drop it off with Jay, promise him I'll buy him some beers, whatever, just need this PlayStation 4. It's been down for a couple of weeks now. It's been down for a lot longer than I've been able to play Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I've been waiting for so long to play. So Jay gets it. He says he needs a couple days, and he can't go back to work because someone by him has coronavirus and tested positive, so they're on lockdown. So here I am, just dipping my toes into the PlayStation 4 Final Fantasy Remake universe, and I can't play it. Poor me. I'm having dreams that end up as nightmares because I wake up and I can't play the game. Not really, but every now and then I can hear Barrett doing the da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na that he does in the remake when you win battles, and it hurts. Long gone are the quarantine all-nighters that I played the game and just kind of went to bed when I was finally tired. So my last couple tidbits on the game. Anyone who's played the recent Final Fantasies, the format of this game doesn't exactly reinvent the wheel, but it still comes together so nicely. And if there wasn't enough nice things I could say about the game, the soundtrack is phenomenal. Same composer as the original. I'm going to give myself one chance to say it. Nobuo Uematsu. I probably botched it. But just hearing the revamped, and there's a lot of original music there too. And they do take something from the Final Fantasy 15 game where you can go and collect records, and that allows you to play and customize the music as you go along. But they're just ridiculous remixes. There's a Chocobo rap remix. It's out there, but it's great. But the original was out there, and I'm gonna kick myself. But one thing that I've not bought, I've always wanted. I have a little bit of a vinyl record collection, not a crazy one. It's a guilty pleasure for sure, because this day and age, let's get real, it is a little crazy to own vinyl records. All sound quality, audiophiles getting mad at me. I enjoy it, but I realize how crazy it is. Now they came out with the remake / redone Final Fantasy VII vinyl, and I haven't bought it. I'm going to buy it. I know I'm getting close, and what's going to end up happening is it's going to sell out and be upcharged to $200, and then I'm going to be dreaming about the unnecessary fandom item that got away again. Now, I know this isn't the first game to get the complete remake treatment. Not even the first game this year. We had Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 2 last year, and Resident Evil's been doing it since the GameCube, but this is the biggest one in scale. I believe this one's going to take the most money, obviously, and I think this is going to make video game remakes the next big thing. Really take it to that next level. Just like most other industries out there, it's a copycat industry. Square Enix is going to make a boatload of money on this. They already have 3.5 million copies, something like that. I saw an advertisement recently. And now every video game company with popular IP of the past 20 years or so, they're going to be looking to cash in. So get ready, because there's going to be remakes of everything. And now you can't escape it. You go online, you look at any social media, and you see people pulling out some crazy things you haven't heard. Oh, they need to remake Bubsy, Gex. They're just throwing them out there. I'd love to see like a Chrono Trigger, something like that. Something that hasn't been beaten to death in the past 10 to 15 years that really is going to create that demand all over again. Final Fantasy VII would have been a good example if we didn't know they were working on this for so long. I see this remake situation kind of like Marvel Studios, but for video games. Meaning Marvel Studios, they made the shared universe so popular, and now you see that on TV, you see it all over the place. I don't want to say everywhere, but a lot more than you used to. Where else do you see, but at the same time they exist in the same universe and all the same companies cashing out? Now you have Final Fantasy proving that with enough time and fan frenzy, you can make a massive hit like this. And who knows what's going on with part 2 of this. Other companies are going to see this and okay, it's time to revisit Conquer or Turok. The list goes on and on forever of what they can do. I mean, there's even a Hanna-Barbera verse coming out, a Scooby-Doo verse. I don't know if there's an official title for it yet, but that's a thing in 2020, all because of how much money and how popular Marvel made it. What is it, 17 years ago at this point? Speaking of older games, I do have to admit, during this quarantine, I have been a bit of a hypocrite. Previous sessions, we were talking about how to allocate your free time and how I was almost stressed about wanting to have new experiences, play new games, but how do I balance that with things I've already played? Well, my wife and I, this entire quarantine, we have been replaying games. I was preaching about wanting to balance and get more of a new experience, and instead I opted to dusting off the PlayStation Classic, playing through Metal Gear Solid, and playing the Final Fantasy XII remaster on Switch. That was, of course, until I had my glorious weekend with Final Fantasy VII Remake, which now I'm back to Final Fantasy XII because at least the Switch is working. And she's been sticking with her Zelda games. She went through Ocarina of Time, Link Between Worlds, which is really just a Link to the Past with a little extra juice in it. And she got started on one of my personal favorites, Majora's Mask. That was until Animal Crossing entered her life. Now, I won't say too much on Animal Crossing because that's more Parrot's wheelhouse. But the one funny thing I've noticed is between her and her friends and her sister that they play, is like a mock socialite kind of, it's almost like a reality show. She plays the game and learns from her sister, and her sister has a big party on the island, and my wife Christina realizes she wasn't invited, starts sending some hate mail. It really is like an animal reality show, but I think they're doing this for fun. So my wife works on getting people from her sister's island to come to her island, and sends her pictures and saying, oh, look who showed up today. So watching from a distance, it is pretty funny. And of course, everything on her island is Zelda. She has a Majora's Mask flag flying. Her bed has the Zelda Triforce sheets. Every time you talk to someone, a little version or different version based on the animal of Saria's song / The Lost Woods plays. And now Parrot's trying to help her out, getting a good priced eBay Wind Waker, because that's the one Zelda game other than Majora's Mask that's eluded her all these years. So as the quarantine stands, the list of heroes goes obviously at the top. You have your essential workers, healthcare, first responders, and then Saint Parrot because of the PlayStation 4, the Wii U for Wind Waker, and the 3DS for Ocarina of Time. I've also been a bit of a hypocrite, not just for saying I wanted to try some newer games and not just keep playing the old, only to be playing the old. But another thing I mentioned, I hated on it a little bit, was playing an online multiplayer or a battle royale and just dropping and doing the same thing over. And then perfect timing for the pandemic, the Call of Duty Battle Royale with 150 players drops right before the quarantine hit. This has become a struggle in the house. On one side of this, I'm addicted and I can't stop playing. On the other side, this is the only sense of camaraderie that I'm gaining through isolation over here, meaning that it's the perfect storm of friends and family that got the game or just downloaded it for the free-to-play Battle Royale. But Call of Duty Warzone, goddamn, I can't stop playing it. I'm not going to pretend like this isn't just a bigger, better version of the Battle Royales that has come before Warzone. But when I was discussing how I'd rather not just keep playing Battle Royales like this, I didn't know we'd be in this situation where this is my main source of social interactions. There's just something about the 20 or so friends and handful of relatives that I play with frequently and just dropping over and over again to try and figure out the best way to survive the other 150 people, 147, 146 at this point. Because now you got trios, you have quads, you have solos, and duos if you're going to play the plunder money chasing mode. But there's just something about getting that final kill and winning, knowing that, say I have an uncle or a sibling or a good friend at my side. Even when I was at my sickest during all this, I really can't complain because thanks to Battle Royale, I have a bunch of close friends that I can interact with and my wife to make me a bowl of cookies or whatever she was going to cook, because that was one of her biggest hobbies she was chasing after during this whole epidemic. And at the end of the day, while we're all in this together, you kind of have to figure out what makes you happy. And it is interesting to see how different people and different industries are handling this situation, this unprecedented situation. One of the more interesting companies to see how they would handle the fallout, the immediate fallout of the coronavirus, is WWE. As everyone knows, they canceled their biggest event, WrestleMania. It was at a football stadium in Tampa. No way it was going to go through, even as it was still on and things were looking more and more dire with the situation at hand. So they opted to hold it 2 nights, no audience, in their performance center, which is a big far cry away from a football stadium filled with whatever it was, 80,000 fans, to a camera crew, announcers, 2 wrestlers, and a referee in a little, what looks like the size of a small warehouse. One thing I wanted to discuss with Parrot before this happened was my predictions for this. Saying, okay, well, they have an opportunity to do something special here. They can basically turn this performance center into a little bit of a glorified movie studio. That was my immediate prediction and hope for it. And they one-up that for sure. So the actual normal wrestling matches that they've been holding, it's a little bit of a learning curve. Without crowd, audience, any interaction. At first, it really did feel like there's something missing. And that feeling, that vibe is still missing. It's impossible to replicate. And it even takes a little bit of a learning curve to watch these wrestling matches without fans and not get weirded out by them. Because now you're really focusing on the wrestlers. So you're hearing like the guttural noises. And I remember the first time my wife walked in and there was a women's match and they're just screaming. It sounds like someone's getting murdered. And I think there was a learning curve for the wrestlers too, because everything's so up in their face. And now they embrace the smack talk a little bit. It's something you don't really get in classic wrestling because there's 60,000 fans screaming at the top of their lungs. So they go and they have WrestleMania. They make it 2 nights. It was like 7 or 8 hours of wrestling. It was obscene amount of wrestling. And they pepper in a lot of stipulation matches, 2 of which being highly cinematic wrestling matches. Now, even if you're not a wrestling fan, the concept of this is a little bit different. I think it would be interesting if I wasn't a fan. But they had a boneyard match where it was The Undertaker versus a younger but great wrestler, AJ Styles. And they wrestled it was basically a graveyard. And there were everything. There was pyrotechnics, there was Metallica, there was motorcycle riding, there were evil druids, and one of the wrestlers, I won't spoil it, but it was an Undertaker, so I did, buried someone alive, the other guy. And then there was the Firefly Funhouse match. I applaud WWE, even though now it sounds a little controversial to say that. Maybe I'm going to pull that back because there are some reports of workers for WWE reaching out to local government over there. It's in Orlando, I believe, the Performance Center, reaching out saying that they're getting basically forced to work in unsafe environments. So I will pull that back, the applause, because that's pretty new information. Might be nothing, sounds like it could be something. But then there was the Firefly Funhouse match. They had John Cena return to wrestle. It's a wrestler, I guess you could call him that, called The Fiend. And The Fiend is a paranormal, he has powers. He basically has a Pee Wee Herman-esque kids show, and it's creepy. He's the normal guy, Bray Wyatt, and there's all hand puppets, and then it gets really weird because his alter ego, the demonic monster face Fiend, takes over, and he has powers to basically warp people to different dimensions. I'm not making this up. This all happened. This isn't just me spouting out nonsense. This is the stuff. This is really happening. So he wrestles John Cena at a Firefly Funhouse and basically warps him to another dimension, and that's where things get crazy. So it was a very meta, technically a match because there was a pinfall at the end, and there was a referee, even though the referee was Bray Wyatt while the Fiend was pinning John Cena, so there's another spoiler, but at this point, if you cared enough, you would see it. If you don't care, it's just outlandish, so I think it's important enough to talk about. They have this meta match where he brings John Cena through steps and stages of his career, and there's some real-life jabs he throws at him about his ex-wife and stuff. He sings his ex-wife's theme song to him, and when there were rumors of John Cena doing whatever it took to step on other people to get ahead, they addressed that, and a lot of people are saying this was actually a low-key retirement for John Cena. But from a creative standpoint, I applaud them. They had the opportunity to do something different, because if they showed this Firefly Funhouse on screen to a football stadium full of people, that's not possible. It wouldn't have worked. People would have booed and asked for their money back for over one 20-minute match. But while everyone's sitting at home and they have this movie studio situation to work out, and a situation where they have WrestleMania, they filmed it 2 weeks before, they televised it. It's not ideal, but considering the cards they were dealt, I applaud them. They did something different. They went out there. And now, apparently, they're just getting started with this, and they're ready for the long haul. Their next event is a event, they call it Money in the Bank, where they have a women's match and a men's match, and it's an 8-way ladder match, and someone goes and gets the briefcase. Moral of this is that now they can do something, they can make it more cinematic, they can add crazy stipulations to this. They're moving it from Florida to Connecticut. They have their headquarters, their new building in Connecticut, their old building in Connecticut, and the lease is running up. They're going to a new building. So what better way to run out this lease on this old WWE headquarters than to have the Money in the Bank ladder match take place in the corporate office. They're saying you have to climb the corporate ladder. So 8 wrestlers are starting at the bottom floor, and they're going to fight their way up. And there was some behind-the-scenes photos that quote-unquote leak, and it's the roof of the headquarters with a wrestling ring and like a pillar, like an overhang that's going to hold the briefcase. So you have to fight your way up the corporate ladder through all the floors of the WWE headquarters. There's no word on if the elevator's use is legal or not, or if you can... It's just going to be a shit show, but it's enough for me to grab my attention. I'm fully in. So they get to the top, and they climb, and they get the ladder, and they get the briefcase, and they win the Money in the Bank. And there is still some more controversy with WWE, with the whole epidemic out there. Stocks are dipping. There was a big lash of releases of wrestlers, referees, behind the scenes talent. More people got released than I knew still worked for WWE. There's some major names out there. You combine this current situation with the XFL, that's Vince McMahon, who took a bunch of money from WWE, sold a bunch of stock, and it wasn't made public until now, with the XFL filing for bankruptcy because they can't play football during this, and it's the first year that the XFL was back, so they made half a season to some moderate success, but we'll never know if it would have stood on its own because the coronavirus hit. So you look at companies like the WWE, it's close to being a monopoly. Obviously it can never be, but really all the second fiddle corporations in wrestling, leagues for lack of a better word. You think, how can the mighty Romans fall? And you look at a situation like this where Vince McMahon sells a bunch of stock, loses the XFL, so whether it was his fault or a force majeure, an act of God situation with the coronavirus, knocking the XFL out, he lost a lot of money, and to the point where they're making massive talent cuts. You know that talent's going to go to the competition. You think, is this a kink in the armor? Is this the beginning of the end? I know they're not close to the end, but if WWE was ever going to fault there, it takes something of coronavirus magnitude to get them there, because they are hemorrhaging money with this coronavirus situation. Think about it. You know, you'd have professional sports leagues and they'll play however many games a year, but WWE's 12 months a year, and there's 2 shows televised a week, there's 1 pay-per-view a month, and there's 3 to 4 house shows a week. This is all out the window. They're not making anywhere near close to that money back. So just something to think about. So hopefully we'll get the parrot back on. I don't know if he wants me discussing this or not, but there is some talk of NERDgent wives. We wanted to do this for a couple years now, and we're at the perfect situation where me, parrot named Mike, parrot named wife, and well, we guess we have to get a good username for Christina. Probably be something Zelda related, where we can have the 4 of us get together. Obviously via Skype, Zoom, we'll make it work, and it's gonna end up being a hash out of the wives versus us. I can already see it coming. I've already tipped my hand on this little mini session on what her angle's gonna be, and it's gonna be goddamn Call of Duty. But I'll have some ammo back, and it's gonna be, well, you know, you do play Animal Crossing a lot. I love it, don't get me wrong, but if I have to defend myself, I'm going to have to defend myself. And we would love to get Jedi Master Fern back on. We need to finish the Star Wars clinic. There's so much more news, and there's been so many developments, I can't even get into it, because we need Jedi Master Fern on hand for this. So I hope this little fill-in session finds you well. We got to talk about some Call of Duty, wrestling, Final Fantasy VII Remake, what we've been up to during this quarantine. I'd love to hear what other people are doing. Also, a little side note, got some Legos, jumped on that. Got the ATST scene from The Mandalorian, and of course, once I saw it was available, right before it would have been looked down on to order something that's clearly not essential, I got this right before it really hit the fan to kind of save for a rainy day. But I did get favorite scene from Star Wars. We just talked about it recently, hyping up the NERDgent Care Star Wars clinic, but it is the Anakin vs. Obi-Wan, Mustafar. It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. So I got that. So look forward to pictures of that on Instagram, because, you know, we're on month number 2 of this quarantine. We got to stick through it together.